From the moment I stepped out of my truck and saw Karen strutting across my weather-beaten porch in her high heels, clipboard in hand and a scowl twisting her lips, I knew this visit would end badly, but nothing could prepare me for the shock that shattered my morning calm like a bullet through glass. I watched her lean in toward my grandfather, who'd arrived at the cabin hours before me, sun-baked and smiling, his knuckles white around his walking stick. Karen barked at him to leave, declaring my family home a fire hazard, her voice vibrating with self-satisfied authority as if she owned the soil beneath our feet. That was the moment time slowed. Her words struck Grandpa like a blow to the chest, and I nearly lost my footing at the sight of his face twisting in confusion and hurt. But the real twist lay hidden in his easy grin and the glint in his steel-blue eyes. She wasn't just some helpless grandfather. Unbeknownst to Karen and her entitled HOA clique, Grandpa owned half the county, his name etched in dusty deeds that made this land his domain. And with that revelation waiting to explode, our reckoning had begun. It wasn't just shock, it was the spark of a reckoning that would raise Karen's carefully cultivated empire of rules and fines to the ground and restore justice to a place she tried to seize by force. As the sun climbed higher, I felt a fierce spark ignite in my chest and knew I'd no longer stand by politely. Karen's smug gaze, sharp as a guillotine blade, met mine, and in that instant I vowed to reveal her ignorance in the harshest, most public way imaginable. She snarled that Grandpa was trespassing, that I was complicit, but her words ricocheted off the hard truth of land deeds older than every nail in these cabins. I moved forward, my boots crunching gravel, to confront her, but she squealed for backup from her HOA lackeys standing behind her like obedient sheep. They fumbled with walkie-talkies and panic curled their lips when they saw Grandpa raise his walking stick, not in violence, but in triumph as he held aloft the leather-bound deed books that bore his signature in slick, confident script. The paper crackled in the breeze, a weapon more formidable than any barricade she could muster. And when Karen's sidekick Linda fumbled the deed and dropped it at her feet, her veneer of control shattered. In that static-charged moment, I recognized the power in Grandpa's calm words. "This land is ours to share, but you have no right here." My blood pounded, each beat echoing with fury and purpose. I strode up beside him, gently touching his arm to steady his triumph. His eyes met mine, and there was pride, fierce and unspoken, as he prepared to deliver the knockout blow to their entitlement. Karen's jaw went slack when she reread the bold letters on the deed. His name, our name, the precise acreages that nullified every HOA edict they'd ever tried to impose. The spectators' neighbors she'd rallied gasped in unison, a wave of doubt rippling through their ranks as the truth sank in. They had followed her blindly, but now the scaffold of lies and overreach creaked under the weight of Grandpa's claim. With a trembling hand, Karen attempted to snatch the deed back, her manicured nails scratching the leather cover, but Grandpa held firm. "We built this cabin with our own hands, fought for every inch of land," he said, his voice steady and resonant. "No self-appointed HOA queen can uproot us." In that breath, I saw her face blanch as the full extent of her miscalculation registered. Years of fines, threats, and invasive inspections evaporated under the bright noon sun. Still, she lunged for control, summoning her small army of enforcers to manhandle Grandpa. But the moment they laid a finger on him, her entire operation unraveled. A neighbor recorded the assault on their phone, the camera capturing Karen's red-faced fury as she realized her precious rules meant nothing to the law. My heart hammered with righteous indignation, and I lunged forward, shielding Grandpa and snatching the phone. "This ends now," I shouted, my voice clear enough to carry to every corner of the clearing. My words, bold and unflinching, echoed like a gavel in an empty courtroom. The neighbors stilled, torn between loyalty to Karen and the undeniable truth in front of them. And then came the twist, rocketing the story into viral territory. Linda's husband, long rumored to be a secret friend of ours, stepped forward from the crowd holding HOA board minutes he'd stolen months ago. Minutes exposing Karen's personal vendettas and illegal charges against dozens of neighbors. He waved them like a champion unveiling a winning hand. The evidence was irrefutable. Forged notices, fabricated infractions, hidden bank accounts where HOA fees were squirreled away, all tied to Karen's insatiable thirst for power. In that electric moment, every whispered complaint and stifled resentment among the crowd erupted into shouts of outrage. I realized this was it. The reckoning I'd sensed brewing since the first insult aimed at Grandpa. Karen's haughty grin flickered, then snapped into horror, as she saw neighbors fanning out to retrieve their own voicemails and texts proving they'd been fined unjustly. The air crackled with fury as they converged, land deeds and affidavits in hand. Karen's authority dissolved like sugar in rain. She backed away, fear shooting through her wide eyes, the clipboard falling from her limp hand, papers scattering like wounded birds across the gravel. My chest swelled with triumph and pity. For no one this entitled deserves our empathy. I stepped closer, voice low but resonant. You made one mistake thinking fear alone grants power. But truth and community reign above any self-declared queen. Her knees buckled as the crowd closed in. Their united presence, a living testament to what can happen when ordinary people reject entitlement. She tried to protest, but no one listened. The sheriff's deputy, called by a neighbor appalled by her aggression, cuffed her without ceremony. She stared at me, rage and disbelief warring in her glare, and I held her gaze steadily. No mercy, no apologies. The cabin door swung open behind me, and Grandpa stood framed in its shadow, steely and triumphant. He nodded once in an almost imperceptible gesture that carried the weight of generations. We defended our home, our heritage, and reminded everyone that land isn't claimed by fear, but by rightful ownership and respect. As Karen was led away, defeated and exposed, the crowd dispersed in murmurs of solidarity, neighbors pledging to rebuild trust and community without the specter of tyranny. Grandpa patted my shoulder, his old eyes shining with pride and something softer hope that the next generation would carry forward the lessons learned here. I turned back to the cabin, where sunlight danced across our porch, unbroken by barricades or signs. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it the promise of renewal. And though the battle had ended, the story had just begun, one about standing up to injustice, the power of truth, and the unstoppable force of community. Now it's your turn. The rustle of voices faded as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the clearing, but the energy of what had just transpired still thrummed in my veins like electricity. Neighbors drifted back toward their homes along the winding gravel road, clutching deeds, affidavits, and the fragments of evidence they'd contributed to Karen's undoing. I remained rooted beside Grandpa, my heart pounding in time with the creak of the cabin's weathered boards as he pushed the door open to reveal the familiar warmth of home. Inside, the air smelled of pine sap and old leather. Grandpa's faithful dog, Jasper, padded forward, tail wagging at our triumphant return. I found myself smiling despite the fierce adrenaline that still rolled beneath my skin. Grandpa set the deed books gently on the rough-hewn table, a silent reminder of how close we'd come to losing everything. He met my gaze with eyes that had seen wars, heartache, and triumph, and I knew then that this was more than victory over an overzealous HOA queen. It was a reclamation of pride, legacy, and the simple joy of belonging. Without a word, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a battered harmonica, the metal dulled by years of use. He pressed it to his lips and blew a single, clear note that trembled through the cabin like a promise. I sank onto the sagging armchair, letting the sound wash over me, memories flickering of days spent fishing in the nearby creek, of storytelling dinners under a starlit sky, and of the countless times Karen had threatened our peace. Now, in the hush that followed his melody, it felt as though the land itself exhaled in relief. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines once more, carrying the faintest echo of applause. We settled into a comfortable silence, punctuated only by Jasper's contented sigh, and the distant chime of a neighbor's porch light switching on. I surveyed the cabin's modest interior, its crooked floorboards, hand-carved shelves lined with dusty jars of preserves, and the quilt Grandpa's late wife had stitched by candlelight, and felt a swell of determination that this place would never again stand under the shadow of fear or illegitimate authority. When I finally spoke, my voice was softer than before but no less resolute. We need to rebuild, I said. And not just this cabin. We need to repair what Karen tore apart in this community. Grandpa nodded, his gaze steady. Truth brought us here, he replied. But it can guide us forward too. Over the next days, we organized gatherings beneath the towering Pinesa Community Forum, held where Karen's barricade had once stood. Neighbors arrived with folding chairs, homemade lemonade, and the faint trace of self-consciousness in their steps as they approached a space that had been tainted by her heavy-handed decrees. One by one, they shared stories of fines they'd paid for imagined infractions, a rose bush pruned without HOA approval, a fence painted the wrong shade of white, even the simple choice to hang laundry in their own backyards. Each confession carried a weight that lifted with the act of collective acknowledgement. I watched as neighbors who'd once refused to meet eyes with one another now laughed over their shared indignities, hands trembling around cups of lemonade instead of clipboards of citations. The community forum evolved into a celebration of resilience. Children chased Jasper through the clearing, while elders discussed volunteer patrols to protect common spaces from genuine hazards, rather than enforcing petty rules. A plan took shape to plant a community garden at the edge of the clearing, each plot tended by a different family, the soil enriched with compost from cabins scattered across the county. As seeds were pressed into the earth, I felt roots of trust and cooperation taking hold where Karen had tried to sow fear. Meanwhile, the legal machinery churned behind the scenes. The county courthouse, once a distant symbol of bureaucracy, became a beacon of justice as the minute those forged HOA records surfaced. Katie, the attorney neighbor who'd offered pro bono services, filed suit against Karen and the HOA board. News crews descended, cameras capturing our faces streaked with sweat and triumph, as we emerged from the courthouse steps bearing stacks of filed affidavits and signed petitions demanding reform. Grandpa winked at me as a reporter asked how it felt to stand up to entitlement. He tipped his hat and simply said, "It feels like home." The viral video of Karen's arrest, streamed live by a brave neighbor, had already amassed hundreds of thousands of views by the time we stood there under a banner reading "Community First, Rules Second." Our victory had transcended county lines, sparking conversations in living rooms and online forums about the perils of power wielded without accountability. Invitations came from nearby towns facing similar HOA overreach, and before long, I found myself on a battered pickup stage in the county fairgrounds, flanked by farmers, teachers, and retired veterans, each sharing how Karen's downfall had inspired them to challenge unjust bylaws in their own neighborhoods. Journalists scribbled notes as I spoke about the importance of deed rights, community oversight, and the simple truth that no one should rule a town from behind a clipboard. In the crowd, I spotted a familiar face: Linda, Karen's former sidekick, eyes bright with remorse and determination. After my speech, she approached, smoothing her skirt as though unsure of her welcome. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling. "I never realized how badly I'd helped her." I nodded, extending a hand. "It's never too late to do the right thing." She joined our budding coalition, offering inside knowledge of HOA procedures and helping us draft a charter that balanced community needs with genuine safety concerns, rather than arbitrary edicts. As autumn leaves began to carpet the forest floor in shades of amber and crimson, work on the community garden bore its first bright sprouts. I sat on the porch one evening, watching fireflies dance among the young tomato plants while Grandpa leaned against the railing, comfortably silent. The horizon glowed with the promise of cooler nights and star-filled skies, unmarred by the memory of Karen's reign. The final legal hearing arrived on a crisp morning, the courtroom packed with supporters wearing pins that read, "Property Rights Plus Community." Karen, looking diminished in her ill-fitting suit, entered under guard. As the judge reviewed the evidence, deeds, board minutes, eyewitness testimonies, Karen's expression flickered between defiance and dawning comprehension that her empire had crumbled. When the gavel finally fell, declaring the HOA board's actions void and ordering restitution for every unjust fine collected, a cheer rose in the courtroom that echoed through the marble halls. I caught Grandpa's eye and we shared a grin that needed no words. Justice, like truth, endures. With the hearing concluded, the county mandated a new HOA charter drafted by residents rather than an all-powerful board, with safeguards to prevent any one person from imposing unchecked authority. The new guidelines emphasized mediation and community votes over unilateral mandates. It was a victory born not of resentment, but of collaboration, a testament to what can happen when people unify around shared values, rather than succumb to fear. Back at the cabin, I organized a harvest feast beneath the pines. Long tables groaned under the weight of casseroles, pies, and jars of preserves, everyone contributing what they could. Strings of lanterns cast a golden glow over the gathering, laughter mingling with the crackle of a bonfire. As music drifted through the night, Grandpa took the harmonica again and lifted its silver glint against the firelight. I joined him with my guitar, and together we played an old folk tune that spoke of home, hardship, and hope. The melody rose and fell like the breath of the land itself, carrying our story beyond these woods. Neighbors danced barefoot in the grass, children twirled until dizziness overtook them, And even Linda, now at peace with her choices, found herself swept into the circle. In that moment, I realized the true power of what we'd achieved. Reclaiming our home had unlocked a spirit of unity that would endure long after the embers cooled. And when the last note faded into the night, I raised my glass and toasted to the county's future, one where authority served the people, and community was more than a word on a plaque. Grandpa clinked my mug gently and whispered, "We did good." I nodded, chest full of pride and possibility, knowing that our story would inspire others long after we were gone. The pines stood sentinel around us, guardians of a legacy reborn through courage and truth. And though Karen's name would linger in county records as a cautionary tale, this land, our land, now bore a new narrative, one of resilience, respect, and the unbreakable bonds of community.